Hi, my name's Kayleigh Frost. I'm the Head of Clinical Support at Health Assured, and you're listening to Peace of Mind. I'm joined today by David. Now, David is one of our counsellors at Health Assured, and we're going to be talking about addiction. So for anyone that's listening or watching, please be warned that there might be some sensitive or distressing content that we discuss, but the aim of our episode today is to hopefully provide some awareness and maybe some hints and tips and some guidance as well. So, hi, David.
Hiya.
Thank you very much for joining me today. This is your first podcast recording of Peace of Mind. How are you feeling?
Nervous? Yeah. A lot of cameras, a lot of lights.
A lot of cameras, a lot of lights. It's all to make us look absolutely fabulous. So we are going to talk about addiction today, and you volunteered to talk about this topic with me. So thank you so much, because it is a bit of a difficult one, and it is quite a specialist area and a lot more complex than the more general issues that we get calls about at Health Assured. But first, you want to tell me a little bit about yourself. You know, why are you a counsellor? How did you get to here today?
It was down to my my addiction.
Okay, yeah.
Personal experience. My choice was alcohol.
Yeah.
So I got caught up in all that pretty early doors. And I got lost in it. I couldn't find a way out. That started from like the school environment. I didn't really feel like I fit in. Yeah. My self-esteem went with it, my low confidence. And then it's navigating the world there on after, and it's trying to find the answer to life really, and what I'm supposed to do and what direction and where I'm supposed to be. And it got a bit too much for me.
Yeah.
I couldn't regulate my emotions, and it was that kind of, I didn't know what I felt. So the only thing that worked was the alcohol.
Okay. And you said that's from quite an early age. So if you say school years.
It wasn't school years. I was pretty good up until a point where we'll touch on this a little bit.
Yeah.
Gabor Mate talks about trauma. I think trauma is relative. Depends on the person. Depends on the circumstances. So I was big into football, and so that was kind of my addiction, my escapism in that. When I got injured, it's kind of set me back and made me put me into feelings.
Yeah.
And I couldn't process it. I didn't know what to do with them. So it was kind of like, then I got lost in it. So I'd say college years, when I was back in there, it was kind of like, I didn't like school, so what am I doing at college? You know, the whole process of that. And I'm like, I feel a bit trapped and claustrophobic with this expectation that I put on myself, but this expectation that I've took from others as well. Yeah. And I rebelled against it, really.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing that. It's a lot, and I really appreciate you sharing that as well, David. And I think if we start looking, I mean, we could probably, I say this in every single episode, but we could talk about these particular topics for hours. And addiction is like a whole other like umbrella there, and it's something that we have a little bit of experience in from a helpline perspective, from an EAP and an SAP, but it needs specialist support, it needs specialist intervention, doesn't it? And it's not, we at Health Assured or any other kind of helpline service can't diagnose someone, but we can help guide them and move them on, and signpost them to where might be best for them, but look at those in the moment kind of coping skills and things like that. If we look at addiction as a whole, what would you say would be the most prominent, or I don't think popular is the right word, but the most like frequently diagnosed types of addiction? I'd
say what's more around your area and your environment.
Yeah.
Predominantly is alcohol.
Yeah.
Is rife, but because it's purely that accessible, and it's not really as taboo as anything else. So it's that kind of, it's acceptable.
It's legal.
It's legal.
Yeah.
So you can go to the corner shop and get it, and it's that, there is stigma to it, but it's that kind of, people will minimise the amount that they do drink to kind of to be, because they are wary of that stigma.
Yeah.
And again, that'll just, depending on your environment and depending on how accessible certain substances are to particular environments, and you get drawn into that, wherever you can get access to.
What do you see many calls coming through, on the helpline, or if through previous practice and training, do you see many kind of cases of challenges with addiction?
Yeah, again, it's the initial where you're asking the alcohol consumption.
Yeah.
People are very defensive about disclosing that, or they'll minimise it. They won't admit to selves how much of a problem it is.
Yeah.
Or they'll kind of go, I'm only having 3 bottles of wine a week. And you'll go, right, okay, so put that in context. So nearly a bottle of spirits. And they'll go, oh, right, actually. And then it raises the bar a bit, and it brings into awareness that actually 3 bottles of wine, not a lot. A bottle of whiskey, different ball game. So then it's kind of like, oh, I didn't realise how much it was. Yeah. But it's a coping strategy.
Yeah, it is. And, we ask it on every clinical assessment that we do with individuals, don't we? We explore alcohol consumption, any medication, even recreational drug use and things like that, because we need to explore those other risk factors with an individual and the coping mechanisms, whether healthy or unhealthy, from an individual's perspective. What do you think are the kind of key ways in which you can identify if someone might be struggling with an addiction? Let's use alcohol, for example.
Yeah, so it will be the amount initially, and then they'll try and minimise it.
Yeah.
So they'll try and justify it as well.
Yeah.
They don't want to admit to self that it is a problem, and they want to remain in control of it.
Yeah.
When you're talking about family issues, and then you're going into the people that are caring, and they're a bit disgruntled or a bit defensive, and they don't understand how they manipulate certain situations to fit in with their need.
Yeah.
So they kind of like want to be left alone to do what they want, without any consequences or nagging or mithering, but they don't see the damage that they're actually causing.
Yeah.
So it's that accountability and responsibility for their lack of awareness, or again the justification. It's like it's readily available, and it's like everyone does it.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that's the same for other forms, or could be the same for other forms of addiction? So drug addiction, gambling, maybe, food addiction, sex addiction. Do you think?
Yeah,
similar.
It's kind of like what it's giving the person.
Yeah.
So, and again, it's going back to Gabor Mate. He's big into the trauma side of it. Yeah. It's identifying why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah. And
what that gives you. So it's that gambling, porn, anything that will take you away from self and then pull you away from how you're feeling, how you're processing it, because people don't know how to do it. It's like they've not been educated how to feel properly. So it's very much I'm feeling uncomfortable. How can I escape this feeling? So that's where the addictions come into play. So they'll get that immediate fix and that gratification. They'll kind of pull them out of that.
Yeah. Do you think, you mentioned about not being educated on how to feel properly. Do you think that can stem, from early years with individuals, maybe not having the right kind of family dynamic, the right kind of influences, for them, to see as you're growing, as your brain is forming and you're, growing up? Do you think that can impact the likelihood of someone leading into an addiction?
I think there's a lot of contesting information, and especially if you go into a fellowship room, steps and whatnot, and some people have got beliefs around it's hereditary. Yeah. And it's kind of like, there's crossovers with it, because in my family dynamic, there was always a keg on tap, or there was always drink in the house, but it wasn't that kind of like, because it was accessible, it was what did my parents use it for? Yeah. And it was that lack of being able to express our feelings and emotions. So that's where your personality traits become inherent, because it's their coping strategies of how to deal with certain issues and certain feelings. It's like, we don't know how to do it. We've come from a wartime generation. So it's that kind of, they didn't talk about feelings. It's like, just get on with it. So then that's passed on to my parents. It's like, I don't know, because I was never taught by them. So then it rolls over. So then we're caught in this society of like, we don't really, it's a doing society. It's like productive. It's like straight from school. It's like you're told what to do. You're told what to think. It's like very regimented up until a point where it's like how you feel. Nobody ever really asked me how I felt.
Yeah.
It's quite alien in a school environment, but he was quite alien at home as well. So then when you're trying to regulate your feelings and emotions and like my goals and my aspirations and this and the other, it's like I'm not really guided or self-regulated. It's kind of like what people expect of me. So then you get swept up in that. And it's like, then people lose part of self with that. So it's that inability to connect with emotions. And yes, it's learned behavior.
There's there's different kind of methods of attack with this, really, because, you know, the way to potentially avoid or mitigate those, you know, the likelihood of forming an addiction is to teach those mechanisms from a very young age and be consistent with that. And I think the school system is very different now. You know, school-placed counsellors, that was never a thing when I was at school. I'm sure it wasn't when you were at school, you know, having on-site counsellors. So that's almost work being done. But then there's this catchment area of, you know, your 20s, 30s and 40-year-olds that haven't ever really had that, you know, from a young age. Again, it's learned behaviours. So those individuals that never had that experience of being taught how to talk about your feelings and express your feelings. So I guess it's all adults, really, I guess. What would be the way to initiate a conversation with someone that you think might be struggling? So you've got a loved one, a friend, you suspect there's, you know, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, you know, porn addiction, gambling addiction. I guess there's no one right way of broaching that subject with someone that you care for, but somehow this kind of stigma needs breaking and someone needs to broach this subject before it gets dangerous, you know, for their loved one. What kind of advice would you share, or what kind of approaches would you suggest?
Go to feelings.
Yeah.
So it's take the actual addiction away.
Yeah.
Don't focus in on the addiction. So
don't talk about the addiction.
I won't talk about the addiction because it kind of, you've got to understand that if people have got a problem with a certain substance, that technically is their best friend. So if you're attacking their best friend, they're going to be defensive about it, or they're going to justify why they're doing or minimise. So it's that kind of go at a different tactics, like how are you feeling from day to day, get a gauge of where they're at, where their sense of direction, goals, like their life direction in a way, because all manner of things could infiltrate that process of wanting to drink, use drugs, this and the other, to escape what parts and what dynamics of their life is making it painful for them, and that suffering what's causing them. It's like if you're stuck in a job that you hate for 5 years, then it's kind of like, oh, this is just my release from this monotony of kind of life. But then they feel stuck and trapped in that. So that cycle and that pattern of destructive behaviour just carries on going until they're not really aware of how it's escalated, because it's kind of, you kind of move the goalposts with it. Yeah. Once it's kind of acceptable to, I don't know, every other day to then every day, and then it's just a glass, and then it just escalates and escalates and escalates. It's like you'll be able to see it for yourself until I suppose you don't. Yeah. And then that's when it's kind of like, have you cut down? Your behaviour's not changed. Are you hiding it? Are you secret drinking? And that opens up a whole new level of deceit and manipulation that comes with it.
What recovery pathways are there for someone that is struggling with addiction? And let's use alcohol addiction, you know.
I'd say straight away, and I know there's stigma to it. And I've had some callers on the helpline where it's kind of like you advise them in the fellowship meetings, and like, I don't fancy that, because what if someone I knows there and engaging in this and the other, and I'm like, well, there's a possibility, but is that going to stop you from getting recovery or turning your life around? For one person, it doesn't really matter. You know, you might be acquaintances, but you know, it's not kind of, but they're impeding your recovery. They're impeding your growth and aspirations and you moving forward. But what it does give you initially is that connection with other people and that like-minded kind of behaviours and attitudes around particulars, but it's all tapped in. It's all revolved around emotions. So if you're not used to it, then it's kind of like that's your first port of call to open up and start understanding yourself. It was when I first went in, I think I was diagnosed with OCD at one point, and that was just purely because I wanted to latch onto something as an excuse for why I drank.
Right. Okay.
So it was that kind of, and be careful of that, is because I got sucked into that, and I sucked a lot of people into it as well. It's like the cause of my addiction it's not my fault, and it wasn't my fault. And I blame my depression on that.
Yeah.
It's like a reason why I did drink.
Yeah.
There is a bit of an overlap. So
going into that, you know, the diagnosis, the addiction, obviously that's never been named as a diagnosis.
That was it. Yes, reminded me. So then it was the OCD. I remember I was in a really bad way, and I got completely lost in this cycle of I'd do bouts of 2-week binge drinking, and then I wouldn't eat. Yeah. Because I'd have that gagging and I couldn't. So then that's something else to look out for. It's like the diet. You can see it physically. It's like that'll diminish. It was when I was in for want of a better word, it was like a detox kind of mental health ward. Right, okay. And it was that kind of, right, so I was speaking to a psychologist, psychiatrist, and I was like, I couldn't find a way out of it. And I wanted something to latch onto that would justify why I do what I do. And it was kind of, I'll take anything, as long as you give me some medication so I can almost use that as an excuse as well. So it was like, I got the OCD diagnosis and I was like, all right, yeah, that explains it, because that's hereditary as well. Yeah. But again, it's like patterns of behaviour that you picked up from your parents who's got OCD. It's not necessarily hereditary. So, but when I went into the rooms, everybody had OCD. So everyone was very like-minded. So then I realised I've not got OCD. I've just got these types of behaviour and way of thinking very similar to the people in these rooms. Yeah. So once you form that kind of connection of understanding that I'm not alone in this, there's other people around it, that's where you get the support from. Yeah. And that's where you find a way out of it. It's like initially going into like an alcohol or drug service to put something in place for you. And again, there's a stigma with that. It's like I'm going to a drug and alcohol service. And it's kind of like that's one step too far. Yeah. But it's like, how far do you need to take it before you admit that you've got a problem? And it's kind of like that could be 6 months down the line, and then you've lost or you've suffered a lot more consequences. Yeah. And that's the big thing with addiction. It's like consequences. Yeah. So it's that kind of, I lost everything. And it's like I had to push it that far for me to get to where I am at the moment. Yeah. So I suppose it's a bit of a saving grace, and that's what put me on the track to where I am now. Was like understanding self. So once I kind of got into the program and got myself a sponsor, and I'd always advise that, it's kind of like, don't just go to meetings to just listen to people talk about their problems and this and the other, because there's a lot of similarities in what they're saying, but it's that you're not putting the work in. You're like a bystander to all the work that's being done. So it's get involved with the program, do the 12 steps. And that's with AA and CA and NA. Yeah. I found NA works better for me. Okay, yeah. And that was purely because it was raw. Yeah. And it was honest and it was brutal. Yeah. And that's what I needed. And it resonated with me. So it was that kind of, I did the steps AA. Yeah. But I preferred the NA.
Do you think, so when you're talking about support groups, drug and alcohol centres, and you're saying about people like, oh, I'm not there yet. Do you think there is a stigma attached to it when people think about more the centres? I think, your drug and alcohol centres, wards, that you have to, people have this stereotype in their mind of what a person looks like that goes to a centre or a recovery centre, a rehabilitation centre. And because they're somewhat functioning adults, they've got a job maybe, and they've got their family, they've got their life, then I'm not ready for that. I'm not suited for that. I'm not bad enough to be there yet. Do you think there's a big stigma?
Absolutely, but it's that kind of how long you're going to wait. Yeah.
But before till you are on the park bench, you know, that person on the park bench.
And exactly, it's that kind of it takes no mercy.
Yeah.
And it's not really bothered about where you come from. Mm-hmm. It's kind of it will destroy anybody within its like wake, really.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you'll get to a point where you think it's under control, but I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah.
And it's like, right, so how many more consequences are you going to take before you realise?
Yeah.
And it does boil down to that. And it's that kind of, do you need to take your house? Do you need to move out?
Yeah.
Right, is that enough?
Yeah.
No, not yet. So it was very much my path was, I'll take your house.
Yeah.
Get kicked out. It's not enough. Now I've lost my house, so then you're suffering more. So then that kind of cascades onto the fact that, no, I need more drink from my perspective. And it's like, right, so now what else do you need to lose? And it's kind of like, well, contact with maybe your daughter a little bit. Maybe it's not enough, but that hurts me more. So it gives me more thingy. So then you lose and lose and lose until you've hit rock bottom and you're practically on the streets. And it's like, right, I've had enough now. I've had enough of punishment. And it's kind of like, how do I get myself better?
Yeah.
But people can't gauge it because it's the subtleties in it.
Yeah.
It's like, don't say anything bad about my best friend because it's my support.
Yeah. Do you think, so looking at things like the binge drinking culture, and like binge drinking addiction. So, you know, it's very glamorized. Again, like, I mean, I talk about my relationship with certain things in each of these episodes as well. And it's something I look back to my university years, my 20s, and living for the weekend, you know, sometimes even a Thursday, start the weekend then. And again, you think, oh, well, I'm not waking up and I need a drink every single day. This isn't an addiction. But there is such like a glamorized living for the weekend approach, and people get themselves into very dangerous situations, physically, mentally, and financially as well. You know, do you remember the times of payday loans? Yeah. So I was in my early 20s. I worked in debt management at the time as well. And the amount of people that were same age as me, living the similar life to me, in £5,000, £6,000, £7,000, you know, as soon as they get paid, everything's gone back and they're taking more loans out, and that horrible cycle to fund their weekends of binging, partying. I think there's less of a spotlight on that because people say, well, you know, Monday to Friday, I'm at work, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Yeah, it might be a bit ropey still on the Monday, but they're living for that and they're consuming dangerous amounts of alcohol, and that becomes their way of life for years, you know, perhaps all the 20s, the 30s. Do you think that's going to cause big issues, you know, moving forward in terms of addictions and people hitting rock bottom just because it's not waking up Monday to Sunday, you know, and having a drink?
It's kind of understanding why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's that because it's part of society and it's a rite of passage when you get to a certain age so you can go out and enjoy yourself. But it's kind of like, can you not enjoy yourself another way as opposed to going out and getting absolutely wasted?
Yeah.
And it's that, well, no, because I don't know, what does it give us? And then if you think about it, what does it actually give you?
Yeah.
What changes your feelings? So then my question is, and I look at it from an outsider now, it's that kind of, what's so unhappy about your life that you want to change your feelings?
Yeah.
But it's also that, is it changing your feelings, or is it like with alcohol, for example, it's kind of like, it's dimming down your thought process.
Yes, yeah.
So it's making you more human almost.
Yeah.
So you're taking that conflict out of your head.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people are. It's like with the internal dialogue.
Yeah.
And the heart space, it's like people don't connect to the heart space and they kind of overthink it. Once you put alcohol in the system, it kind of like regulates it all.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of, right, so now I like it. Now I'm more comfortable because you're more yourself.
Yeah.
You're more your authentic self when you're in alcohol.
Yeah.
So it's like we practice being more authentic self without it.
Yeah. And I think that's such a huge piece that's missing. People don't know what their authentic self looks like, the Monday to Friday, you know, always chasing that better version of themselves, the you know, more of a laugh, more confident, you know, more social, more into, you know, like personable and stuff when you've had a drink. And
with some people though. And it's that kind of, I was never an extroverted person that would be a laugh, you know, the life and soul of the party. I'd always go into myself.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, if it's tapping into your emotions, it's like understanding what the alcohol is serving them.
Yeah.
And you could identify that within the family dynamic. It's like, if you're not happy and jovial while you're having a drink, it's like you're tapping into your emotions.
Yeah.
So then what emotions are you tapping into?
Yeah.
So then that's where the cycle of the addiction is, like you're tapping into your feelings.
Yeah.
If they're destructive feelings, you're caught in this cycle then
Yeah.
of feeding the same horrible negative feelings.
Yeah.
Whereas you're more jovial, it's like, oh, it's quite nice, this, because it's quite liberating. So I suppose he's watching out for what the drug gives the person.
Yeah.
Does it pull them into sadness, or is it happiness? There'll come a point where there's no happiness involved, but it's catching it at that time.
Yeah.
And where's the mark?
Yeah. Where is that? What would you say in terms of, like, so crunch time, hit crunch time, someone is going, right, I've got a problem, I need to sort it. Practically, what are the next steps for someone that recognises they need help? Would it be GP first? Like, where do they go?
Depends on how good your GP is. That's being honest. If you've got a good GP, go to your GP. If you've not, you don't find much use, I wouldn't waste your time. It's kind of like you've got to take, in a way, and this is what I learned late on. Mm-hmm. You've got to be responsible for your recovery.
Yeah.
Because no one's going to do it for you.
Yeah. Even
though you'll get people on the helpline where they'll go in, the acts of desperation on their part. It's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help them. And it's kind of like, well, you can't really until they're open to helping themselves.
Yeah.
So that's the first step into your kind of recovery journey, and putting the substance down is by admitting that you've got a problem. Mm-hmm. That could be 6 months down the line.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like so with your alcohol services, yes, there's stigma. And yes, it's the people that you're bumping into as you're walking in there. And it's kind of like, I don't want to be associated with that. But then also you've got the meetings, and it's kind of, I don't know what your generalised idea of what a meeting room looks like, but they're in recovery, so they want a better life. So the kind of, what I can say is the most genuine, authentic, loving people you're ever likely to meet, because they've had to do the work.
Yeah.
So it's that, if you want something that'll ease you in as your first port of call, get to a meeting.
Yeah.
Because you'll be welcomed with a brew and a biscuit. And it's like you'll be sat by next to someone if you don't feel comfortable. People will come and talk to you. If you want to be left alone, they'll leave you alone. Mm. You don't have to share. You don't have to speak in your first couple of meetings. It's kind of like, just get a feel for it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, as long as you come away from there with some idea that, yeah, I felt a connection, you will do. And I'm not judged. Whereas you are in day-to-day life.
Yeah.
When it's that kind of,
it's the safest space.
It is a safest place, but it's a unique experience.
Yeah.
Because that's how people should be.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have thought you'd get that from an AA or an NA meeting.
Yeah. Talking about meeting, are there, forgive me for my ignorance, are there meetings and groups for various different addictions? Because I know AA and I know GA for gambling, but are there, you mentioned NA, what's NA? Narcotics, yeah.
Then you got Cocaine Anonymous.
Okay, yeah.
And then I don't know how they word it. There was Sex Anonymous.
Yeah, okay.
It's just the ones that I'm privy of, but then there was also Lip Balm Anonymous.
Lip Balm Anonymous.
Because again, it's that kind of, it's a habit.
Really?
Yeah.
So there's communities and there's groups for pretty much any addiction.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're unsure about that, you can just, I'm guessing, I mean, we've got libraries of different signposting and stuff like that at Health Assured. So if you have access to an EAP, call them, they can give you some suggestions. But it could just be a simple case of popping things in online and seeing where your nearest support group is, I'm guessing.
Yeah, there's I know there's a lot of men's groups out there.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've not looked at the women's side of it, but there were women's groups as well.
Yeah.
So it's just tapping into, if you don't feel comfortable in going to, you know, an NA on it because of the stigma or whatever, go into your local, say, an Andy Mann's group or something like that. They're popping up all over the place.
Yeah.
So it's just getting in that habit of talking about how you're feeling and what's going on for you. And then it's like starts the process, because if you feel trapped or you can't disclose or share within a family dynamic, or you can't share within your friends, it's like outsource it to someone that an impartial, that they will listen and they do care. And
it's people are all there to work on themselves and hopefully share and support other people that have maybe earlier on in their journey of recovery. And you saying about it being, you know, like a non-judgmental space, it reminds me, you know, of people when they've got anxiety of going into a gym, and what people are going to think, are they looking at me with what I'm wearing and doing this, and do I look silly? Nobody in that gym cares, because they are there to work on themselves. Then they're probably racked with the same kind of anxieties themselves of thinking, oh, are they going to look at me? So it's a similar thing, you know, people going to something to better themselves are already potentially caught up in their own head. And, you know, they're not worrying about judging someone else there, because they're already worried of the judgment they're going to receive, or, you know, their own anxieties. So it sounds like that is the safest place if you are worried about judgment. It doesn't matter if it's, you know, John from down the road, because John from down the road's having a really crap time himself, or he has had, and he is there to help himself and get that support that he needs, you know. Yeah, I had the same thing about going into meetings. I was like, what if I bump into someone? Yeah. I never did. Yeah. And it's that you'll meet people, and you'll meet friends there, and you'll meet people that guide you along the way. Yeah. And they're the best kind of people that you need to be in and around. Yeah. It's like the person you know that you might bump into there, again, like you said, they want the best for themselves. Yeah. And you can support each other along that way. Yeah. And it's like developing that better sense of, I'm doing something about it. And it's empowering that. And there's a lot of, it's like, it takes a lot of humility to step through the door. Yeah. But it's also empowering. It's like you're doing it for you. And it's the best kind of, if you know, people want counselling for their addiction, that go to your meetings. Yeah. Get into a step program, because that will set you up. They'll identify certain flaws in your character that you weren't aware of. And then it's kind of like, right, now that I'm aware of it, then I can do something about it. Yeah. And that's what the gift of recovery is. It's that kind of, I can remold myself into the person I want to be. Whereas everyday people don't have that opportunity. Yeah. We've said it before, we could talk about this for a very long time. What do you think, before we wrap this up, I feel like, you know, we've covered a lot, probably could do 10 more episodes on it. What do you think some kind of 3 key takeaways, you know, for anyone that's listening to this, that's worried about some maybe red flags in themselves or other people, you know, what 3 things, you know, would you want them to take away from listening to this today? You're not alone. Yeah. You don't have to be. And it's like the only people that will understand you are the people outside of your family dynamic. Yep. So it's going to the right people that you can make those connections and get that better level of understanding. Your family will push because they care. Yeah. And that is one. It's not that they're not criticising you, they just don't know what to do. Yeah. And it's like the heart's in the right place, they just don't want you to suffer. It's that you don't understand that at the minute that you are suffering. And it's that, don't take it to heart with your family, because family are key to it. And it's always a place for change. It provides that motivation. So it's that kind of, my daughter was mine, you know, she was my guardian angel, and it's kind of like, that's the reason why I got recovery in the first place. So don't push your family aside neither. So that's definitely key. It's about connecting. It's about feeling. Yeah.
And it's definitely more important than anything, it's about tapping into feelings. And it's understanding, yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's why you've masked it with the drug of choice.
Yeah.
Get used to listening to that.
Yeah.
Don't listen to your head space, listen to your heart space.
Yeah.
Because that's your guide. That'll hijack it.
Yeah.
And that's why I always tell a lot of people on the service, on the helpline.
Yeah.
So if you start listening to this, that'll guide you right.
Yeah.
That'll hijack. And just remember that.
That was lovely. That's I think a perfect way to end this episode. And thank you for sharing so many of your own personal experiences as well. That is, it's invaluable as well for anyone that's listening. It might resonate with a lot of people, and I think you will help validate and normalise a lot of things for anyone that's listening. So thank you so much. I've learned a lot as well, and I'm sure other people listening will have learned a lot as well. And just to anyone that is listening that is concerned, reach out for support, whether it's for yourself or others. Seek some guidance and some more advice. If you've got access to Health Assured through the EAP, just give us a call if you just want to hash something out with someone, and just talk that out, and you might get a little bit more clarity and perspective on what to do next. So thank you very much, David. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.